welcome to the ConfigMgr Technical Preview Podcast. I'm Nathan Zenert, your host. You can catch me on Twitter at TheZenerd. You can also catch me on the WinAdmins Discord. Link in the description on how to join that if you are interested. This podcast, vidcast, whatever we're going to call it, is all about the technical preview releases for ConfigMgr, so what is likely coming down the road. Things are never guaranteed with technical preview. Things will change. New features may get released. They may not get released. They have and will change as the ConfigMgr team works to perfect those things before they make it into the actual feature releases that you'll be deploying to your environment. But it gives you something to look forward to as we look to the future of how we manage devices with ConfigMgr. You can learn about all of this stuff in the Microsoft Docs, also a link in the description as well. But frankly, I'm one of those people who likes to have somebody tell me what to be interested in, or maybe you're in a place where you just don't want to read, but you can have a podcast on in the background. All of those options will hopefully be helped by this video series. We have a lot to talk about this month as we had two technical previews come out. Technical Preview 2001 and Technical Preview 2001.2. So let's get to it. All right, so to kick it off, let's talk about my top three features. The first of which is token-based authentication for the Cloud Management Gateway. Now, if you have some aversion to joining your machines hybrid or otherwise to Azure AD, or you've got just a nasty PKI environment that doesn't really allow you to facilitate communication through the Cloud Management Gateway, this is going to be a feature you want to pay attention to. You have now a way to move to the Cloud Management Gateway without the silly certificate requirements or dealing with hybrid join for a domain environment. There is a caveat to all of this. It only works in the device-centric model, so user deployments wouldn't be registered on the endpoint. Only device deployments will be registered. Similar to how you would experience Cloud Management Gateway if you're using PKI instead of Azure AD joined devices. We're going to have two methods for enrollment with the token-based authentication, and the first one is going to be your internal network join, which is similar to how you're registering devices with ConfigMgr today. When your device checks in and registers with the management point is going to assign to that device a unique token that identifies it, and when combined with the self-signed certificate from ConfigMgr, allows communication through that Cloud Management Gateway. But let's say you've got devices that are already in the field that you can't register with the management point because they don't have a VPN connection, or whatever various reason may cause them to not be able to reach the internal network. You can create a bulk registration token that by default lasts for 3 days, and you can use that inside of the command line to install the ConfigMgr client, and then that will be able to register through the Cloud Management Gateway in the same way that you would register with the MP. It uses that token and combines it with the self-signed certificate from the device, and the Cloud Management Gateway will accept communication. That bulk registration tool is included in the ConfigMgr program files directory under bin x64 and then bulk registration tool.exe. So why don't we take a look at that really quick and take a look at what some of the options are with that utility. All right, so what we've got here is just a standard ConfigMgr primary site using the technical preview branch. We're going to go ahead and navigate to our program files directory here. I'm going to open up ConfigMgr, bin x64, and search for the bulk registration tool. That's where the utility is located. I'm going to open a command prompt from here. We can do this from the address bar of the window here, and that'll open us directly to this directory. The problem is we need administrative rights to run this, so I've already opened the administrator command prompt here. And let's just go ahead and run the bulk registration tool and see what arguments are given to us. So for our arguments, we've got the ability to create a new registration token. We've got an ability to set the lifetime of the token, list all of the current active bulk registration tokens, and then block or unblock tokens as necessary. Now, one thing to note about the lifetime, the maximum time is 7 days. The default is 3, so you can make them as short as 1 minute. You can make them as long as 7 days, but you can't go over 7 days. Let's go ahead and create a new bulk registration token here. So we'll just pass it the new argument. And you'll see that we have our token generated here. The token is valid by default for 3 days, and it's assigned a GUID to this token. Now note that the token itself is not stored in the database, so you need to make sure that you export that and save it somewhere safe and secure, because this is unique to your environment. Now we can attempt to give it a new lifetime, and if we go, 1440 is a day of minutes. If we set that to 10 days, we will get this lovely error message here: provided lifetime must be smaller than 7 days. And if we run the list option or argument, we should get a list of tokens, but that is currently still coming down the road. So it doesn't currently list any of the tokens. It just provides you a to be determined value. So that's a bulk registration tool. To use this as part of an installation, you basically are going to just pass, you're just going to pass this token value in the command line to install the ConfigMgr client on that workstation, and it will automatically be able to register through the Cloud Management Gateway. Also, it should go without saying that you need a Cloud Management Gateway configured and installed before this is going to function. All right, so back to the list. Coming in at number 2 for my top 3 is the task sequence progress improvement. Square, they actually made 2 changes, one in the first release and one in the second release for January. This is going to let you see the number of task sequence steps that have currently completed, how many steps are in the task sequence, as well as a percentage indicator, so you don't have to try to guess how many blue squares have completed and how many that translates to a percentage, or counting if you're really incredibly picky. You just get all of that information in the TS Progress UI. Now the change that came in Technical Preview 2001.2 is you can now choose whether or not to show these and what level of info you want to show via a variable called TS Progress Info Level. If you set that to 1, you're going to get the steps and total steps. Set it to 2, you'll get the current step, total steps, and the percentage completed. And if you set it to 3, you're going to get just the percentage completed. So let's take a look at that really quick. Back in our ConfigMgr primary site, you're going to see a few task sequences that I've created. We're going to take a look at this task sequence progress and child task sequence that will run as part of the progress, or part of the parent, just so you can see how it counts the steps out. If you take a look at the first step here, you'll notice I am setting that TS Progress Info Level to 2. That's going to give us all of the available information: current step, number of steps, and percentage complete. We're just going to run a few command.exes with no exit, or no fail on exit, and we'll run this child task sequence. Now inside that child task sequence, we're doing just a few more of those command steps, no fail on exit. All right, now if we go over to our virtual machine here with the task sequence advertised to it, log in, we can execute this task sequence here. And you'll notice that we've hit our first no fail on exit step here. There are 7 steps in the task sequence. Now the thing to note here is that ConfigMgr is going to count all of the available steps, including disabled steps and steps that might be filtered out due to conditions that you've set. So this is really just kind of a baseline for where you are in the task sequence. And we will get that percentage complete. It looks like it's excluding the step that we use to set the task sequence progress level in our count, because notice we're running action 1 of 7, even though we've technically already completed 1 of 7. But that is totally fine. If we exit this process here, we should move on to the next step, which is running the child task sequence, which includes this particular step a couple of times. And notice that we just continue to progress through this task sequence, and we get a percentage complete and the current step that we're on. And if we exit the task sequence, we will have a completed task sequence. Number 3 on my top 3 for Technical Preview 2001 is the check readiness task sequence step. And if anybody is familiar with what it is currently in current branch, let's be honest, it's not that great. You get minimum memory check, minimum processor speed check, minimum free disk space check, and whether the current OS is a client or server. So definitely provides some value, but not as much value as we would like to see, and we end up as administrators a lot of times just developing our own pre-flight checks or using a tool like UI++ to handle those pre-flight checks for us. In Technical Preview 2001, a lot more features have been added to this check readiness step, so let's take a look at them. All right, coming back over to our primary site, we've got this check readiness task sequence, and we'll just take a look at it. You'll notice that it just has the one-step check readiness, but we've got a whole host of new options here, such as architecture, 64-bit or 32-bit, a minimum and maximum OS version. So if you want to check to make sure that the client hasn't already upgraded or at least meets the minimum requirements for what you've tested, you can configure that. You can also configure a minimum client version, so you want to make sure that the ConfigMgr client is up to a specific version before you execute the task sequence. You're able to do that as well. Double checking the language of the current OS to make sure you don't install a French version on an English task sequence. An AC power check, this is huge for laptops. I know we do that quite frequently when I create task sequences for clients. And then this is my favorite one, network adapter connected, and making sure that the network adapter is not wireless. So we can make sure that we're imaging just over a hardwired connection. This is super cool. Hope someday there might be a way to filter VPN. Right now, it's not in here. I know that would be a super complicated one to try to implement inside of this particular step, but I can keep my fingers crossed if I really want here. Additionally, it should be noted that the check readiness step adds a bunch of task sequence variables to your task sequence variable table, and so you can pull and create your own GUI for task sequence readiness checks that maybe fail. So if the device isn't plugged in, you can create your own nice WPF PowerShell GUI to display that to your end user instead of just failing out the task sequence. All right, so let's talk about the features that aren't in my top 3, didn't make the cut, but are still really cool that came out with Technical Preview 2001. And the first is improvements to the send a smile or send a frown feature in the console. Let's take a look at that really quick. All right, back in our primary site in the ConfigMgr console, we're going to go up into that top corner here, and we're going to send a smile because I love the ConfigMgr team. And what feedback did I like? I really enjoy the new task sequence readiness step. Don't need an email address or a screenshot. They can just get the smile and be happy about it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the submit feedback button. And they received my feedback. So what's changed? It doesn't look like much, huh? Well, now we can check to see the status message that got created inside of the console. So if we come over to our monitoring tab, open up status message queries here, and let's just audit from a specific site. You know, our site code is TPL for mine, and we know that we did this within the past hour. So let's go ahead and click OK, and we will see, hey, look, I sent a smile. User nzenert.da from machine tplab zenert.dev successfully submitted a smile feedback. Cool. You'll see the status message ID is 53900. You can use this to check in on your coworkers, see if they're having issues, if they're sending frownies, also making sure that their ratio of frownies to smileys is appropriate so that the ConfigMgr team doesn't feel too bad about an amazing product. If you like dashboards, you've been getting your fill of those in ConfigMgr recently as the team adds more and more of them to the ConfigMgr console. The Edge dashboard is no exception to that. I don't have enough data in my environment to show you what this looks like properly, so we're going to take a look at the screenshot from Microsoft Docs here to give you an idea of what this dashboard looks like and the features that it has. So taking a look at this Edge Management dashboard, you're going to find that in the software library under Microsoft Edge Management. And you can choose a collection just like any other dashboard that we have inside of ConfigMgr. You're going to see a chart in here showing you the number of devices with Microsoft Edge, including a percentage. You're going to see the installed browsers across devices, and you're going to see the Microsoft Edge versions. And then with Technical Preview 2001.2, they added this additional graph showing you what default browsers are set on the device as well. So this can kind of give you a high-level overview in your environment of who's using Edge, who's not using Edge, where is it installed, and how many third-party browsers are you running as well. You notice that also Edge is broken out from Edge Dev and Edge Beta as well. Next on the list of improvements is OneTrace Log Groups. If you're using OneTrace in your environment right now, you'll be able to open up collections of logs based on different scenarios. And right now those three scenarios are application management, compliance settings or DCM, and software update logs. So we can take a look at that on the test machine here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open the Support Center OneTrace application on this device. And down here in the bottom right hand corner you will see these log groups, and if we choose application management, you'll see that all of the appropriate logs for application management are selected, and hit open all, and it will combine all of those files in for you so that you have the ability to not have to open them individually manually. You can do that for software updates as well. Again, just combines all of those files into a nice readable view here. The next improvement I want to talk about is the admin service. If you're currently using the admin service, you've already got it set up. If you're not currently using the admin service and you want to investigate it later, coming down the road, by default, the admin service is just going to use the site self-signed certificate. You don't have to enable EHTTP or PKI, because I know how you all feel about certificates. ConfigMgr is just going to handle that for you and enable it by default using that self-signed certificate. Next, if you know anything about me, I love peer cache, I love branch cache. All of the peer-to-peer solutions built into ConfigMgr really help reduce that WAN traffic utilization that can be just a bear in some environments. I work for some oil and gas companies, and trying to get data and content out to those rigs can be a pain. In ConfigMgr Technical Preview 2001, you now have the ability to exclude certain subnets from peer cache or peer content download rather. So let's say you've got a VPN that you always want excluded from peer content sharing inside of a boundary group. Well, now you can define that, but look at this tweet from Aaron. Oof, yeah, so this is going to require a little bit of PowerShell scripting. You got to modify, or really whatever scripting language you want, as long as you can manipulate WMI. It requires changing an embedded property within a WMI class. It's cool. I would like to see this exposed in the UI, similar to how the duplicate hardware identifiers are currently exposed. If that doesn't happen, I don't see a lot of people doing this. If you have a need for it, definitely going to be of value. You're going to be able to modify those, but again, I'd like to see this exposed in the UI. Next one goes out to Adam Gross, because I know he's a Power BI junkie, maybe not by choice, but he at least knows it pretty well. So if you've got a Power BI report server, you can now integrate it with ConfigMgr similarly to how you integrate SSRS or SQL Server reporting services with ConfigMgr. You'll be using Power BI report server in place of SSRS. As it stands currently in the documentation, you actually have to remove SSRS for the Power BI integration to work. I'm not sure if that's a technical limitation or just the ConfigMgr team wants to make it less confusing, but that is, as far as documentation concerned, a limitation at the moment. And all of the old reports are still going to work, so let's take a look at that really quick. Right, back in our ConfigMgr console here, we're going to go over to our monitoring tab and expand reporting. Notice I have this new Power BI reports section here. If I expand reports, we've got all of the standard reports that we had. So if I pull up Site General and run computers for a specific site, the report is still going to run. Let's choose the correct site code here. The report is still going to run. It just happens to execute from within Power BI report server instead. But now we have the ability to import Power BI reports into the server. So we're going to go ahead and run this really stupid report. It literally does nothing except provide a graph here, and the graph doesn't even make sense, but just to show you, if we run in browser, we don't get to run it from within the console, but we can run it from the Power BI report server directly. I'm actually going to copy this because it is not working in IE for me, and we'll run it in Google Chrome instead. Pass it my credentials. I'm sure I can fix that, but for the time being, we can at least view the report here without that. And hey, look at that. We've got a build number organized by site code and version. Again, really stupid report, but at least it shows you can run these reports and import them into ConfigMgr, your ConfigMgr site. Next feature that got released with ConfigMgr Technical Preview is the orchestration group improvements. And actually there's two improvements that were added. We have timeout values now that we can set on orchestration groups or group members. So if you want a time to complete the upstate installation for all group members, you can set that. Additionally, you can set time limits for single devices to complete their update installations. Another change that was made in Technical Preview is the ability to select the site code associated with the members that you want to assign to the orchestration group. So we can define, if you have multiple sites, where those devices are coming from. Additionally, the wizard now allows you to select the number of machines to update at a time and also the script timeout for pre and post scripts. So if we continue through this, we'll add a resource or two here. We'll add that resource to our resource group. You now have the ability to select the number of machines to be updated at the same time or a percentage from the console, and then set your timeout scripts for your pre and post scripts as well. Additionally, now you can change the settings for existing groups by right-clicking on the group and selecting Properties. And this is going to fail out on my machine. I've got some sort of value parameter, but anyways, we pull up the list of properties. We can now make changes to that from within the orchestration group wizard. And then finally, you can now actually start the orchestration from the console. We can kick off the action for the orchestration group from within here, and it will kick off that process to do the updates from the console. Coming down to our last three features in Technical Preview 2001 and 2001.2, we've got improvements to the task sequence as a deployment type feature. Client-side functionality is finally here, so now you can see the deployment in Software Center. It still has the caveat, don't nest install application steps that also use the task sequence deployment type inside of a task sequence deployment type that's part of an application. If that's confusing, just don't use install application if that application also uses the task sequence to deploy it. It doesn't like nested task sequences. Additionally, we have some improvements to cloud-connected services, basic improvements to monitoring connection health between ConfigMgr and cloud services, critical status messages when there are server connection errors, and then additionally the dashboard now shows connection issues. So when a client can't reach out to a required endpoint for desktop analytics, you'll see an alert in the dashboard, and then you can now see proxy authentication issues for connectivity status for those CM clients. And last but not least, you can now wake a device from your central administration site or CAS. If you're using a CAS, I hope you have a good reason for it. There are limited instances where it is valuable, but I do know it is valuable for some. But you can, from the client notification section in the CAS, you can now wake up a client from within one of the primary sites. So that's going to wrap it up for ConfigMgr Technical Preview 2001 and 2001.2. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any suggestions or comments, please leave them down below. I would be happy to respond to them. And if you got suggestions for improvements or things you want to see in more detail, also leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to address those in the next video. But until next time, happy adminning.